Welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at a landscape today that, well, it feels like watching a new continent being formed in real time,
Yeah.
right out of the ocean.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty accurate way to describe it.
Because for the last couple of years, so much of the conversation around artificial intelligence has been focused on these highly visible, but, ultimately small scale applications.
The parlor tricks.
Right, the parlor tricks. We've all seen the massive influx of tools designed to uh, speed up your email drafting or generate a quick logo for a weekend project.
Or those endless tutorials on using AI for some clever little side hustle.
Exactly. Squeeze out an extra 50 bucks a week.
Mm.
And that level of accessibility is genuinely fantastic for getting people comfortable with the technology.
It is, yeah.
But focusing on those micro interactions, it completely misses the massive tectonic shifts happening right beneath our feet.
It's an issue of scale, really, and perspective,
Hmm.
because looking at those micro applications is like observing the invention of the combustion engine and only getting excited because it might power a slightly faster
A
bicycle.
faster bicycle, right?
It completely misses the broader implication that this technology is going to fundamentally reshape global infrastructure, logistics, the very architecture of how entire cities function. If you get caught up in the parlor tricks, you miss the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because our mission today is fundamentally different from tracking those minor efficiency hacks.
Mm-hmm.
We are diving into a stack of sources that map out the transition from simple AI side hustles to the literal building blocks of the next wave of billion-dollar enterprises.
This is where the real money is moving.
We are looking at a highly strategic roadmap, 10 specific AI startup sectors poised for explosive growth.
Yeah.
And we're going to tear down the existential risks they're currently trying to outrun. We are tracking where the absolute smartest global capital is flowing right now,
What's fascinating here is that to understand this roadmap, we have to stop treating this strictly as an exploration of futuristic technology.
which is hard for a lot of people to do.
It is. It's the trap a lot of developers and early adopters fall into. They get entirely blinded by the elegance of the code or the novelty of a new foundational model.
Right.
What we're really analyzing today is a massive, violent shift in the economic landscape. It's about how the core mechanics of business itself are being restructured. The traditional rules of scaling a company, of reaching that coveted unicorn valuation of $1 billion,
Those rule books are gone.
they're being actively rewritten as we speak.
And that is exactly why we've tailored this deep dive for you. Whether you are an entrepreneur trying to architect your next venture or a professional navigating a tech ecosystem that seems to radically alter its own premise every Tuesday.
Literally every Tuesday.
Right. Or if you're just insanely curious about the actual mechanics of the future economy, consider this your masterclass.
How about
We're breaking down exactly what is happening in the venture capital space, why the window for these specific applications is opening right now, and the brutal reality of what it takes to actually build these things. So let's jump straight into the boom itself.
let's do it.
Why are AI startups suddenly commanding these astronomical billion-dollar valuations seemingly overnight?
It's a perfect storm.
To me, reading through the analysis, it feels like we've crossed a very specific threshold of rapid innovation. If you think back to the early internet, we lived in the dial-up era for what felt like an eternity.
Oh, yeah. The screeching modem sounds.
Exactly. It was functional. You could send a text-based email, maybe load a heavily compressed image if you had 5 minutes to spare.
If nobody picked up the landline.
Right. But you certainly couldn't stream a 4K movie or host a seamless global video conference. You had to wait for the physical infrastructure of broadband to catch up to the theoretical promise of the web.
The pipes just weren't big enough.
And right now, it feels like AI just got its broadband moment.
That's a great analogy.
The underlying models, the context windows, the multimodal processing power, the semantic understanding, they finally crossed the Rubicon from interesting research project to enterprise-grade scale.
The pace of innovation is staggering. I won't argue with that. But I'll push back slightly on the idea that the technology itself is the primary driver of these valuations.
Really? How so?
Well, history is essentially a graveyard of brilliant paradigm-shifting technologies that fundamentally fail to find a market or generate actual revenue.
Fair point.
We have to ground that technological excitement in a much colder business reality. What is actually driving this specific boom, and the reason we are seeing venture capital deploy billions of dollars into these specific niches, is an unprecedented level of global corporate demand.
You're talking about the macroeconomic pressure on these legacy companies.
Exactly. You look at companies all over the world across every conceivable sector, and they're facing a crushing convergence of pressures.
Inflation, supply chain.
And incredibly bloated overheads. Built up over the last decade of low interest rates, they're desperate. They have an existential need for operational efficiency.
So they aren't buying the tape because it's cool.
Not at all. When a Fortune 500 company signs a massive contract with an AI startup, they aren't doing it because the technology is intellectually fascinating. They're buying it because it is currently the most viable answer to their most urgent question,
Which is how to survive.
which is how do we execute our core business functions, doing significantly more while spending significantly less?
Doing more with less. It's the eternal corporate mandate. But the scale at which AI allows them to achieve that is what's shifting the venture capital landscape.
Hmm.
Looking at the capital flow data in our sources, it's clear that global VC money is aggressively pivoting. They're pulling back from traditional software as a service platforms. They're pulling back from consumer social apps.
The era of funding 10 different food delivery apps is over.
Thank goodness. And they're effectively throwing their entire weight into the AI sector.
Yeah.
But it's not a blind spray and pray approach, is it?
No, they are looking for a very specific type of structural advantage. They are hunting for leverage.
Leverage. Break that down for us.
To understand the current VC mindset, you have to look at how the mechanics of investment have permanently altered. For the last 10 to 15 years, if you wanted to scale a software startup to $1 billion valuation, it required a massive continuous injection of upfront capital.
But hire people.
Exactly. You needed to hire hundreds of specialized software engineers, build out a sprawling enterprise sales team, construct a massive HR department to manage everyone.
Customer success reps to handle onboarding.
Right. The human overhead was staggering. Startups had to burn through hundreds of millions of dollars of venture capital just to capture the market share required to eventually reach profitability.
Full blitzscaling model.
Yes. And the AI paradigm we are entering shifts that entire dynamic on its head.
Which brings us to one of the most compelling insights from the research. The sheer disproportionate power of the small team advantage.
This is the real game changer.
I want to really dig into the mechanics of this because it challenges everything we've been taught about corporate growth. We're looking at a reality where a team of 3 or 4 highly capable people can literally out-execute a legacy company with thousands of employees.
It's David and Goliath, but David has a laser-guided missile.
How does that actually function in practice?
It functions through the utilization of foundational AI models as instant infrastructure. Think about what scaling required in that traditional model.
Right.
Massive human capital.
Right?
If you wanted to spin up a new product feature, you needed a product manager to spec it out, a design team to wireframe it, front-end and back-end engineers to code it, QA testers to try and break it.
And a marketing team to write the copy for the launch.
It's a
Month of meetings right there.
minimum. Today, a small, highly adaptable team of, say, 3 brilliant generalists armed with autonomous coding agents, AI-driven testing protocols, and generative design tools can output the same feature in a fraction of the time.
So the AI acts as a massive force multiplier for human intent.
Precisely. And more importantly, these small teams can outmaneuver the corporate giants because they don't have the bureaucratic drag.
They don't have to spend 3 weeks getting a new deployment architecture approved by a committee of middle managers.
Exactly. They can pivot their entire product strategy over a weekend based on live user feedback.
Wow.
From a venture capitalist perspective, this is the holy grail of investing. You are looking at potentially staggering returns, high impact, massive scalable revenue, but with incredibly low initial overhead.
Because the risk-reward ratio has fundamentally changed.
Yes. A $10 million seed round can theoretically get a startup all the way to a $1 billion valuation because they simply don't need to hire a massive workforce to build the product.
It's incredible leverage. 3 people sitting in a co-working space, wielding the operational capability of a mid-sized multinational.
It completely levels the playing field in terms of production.
But, as the sources point out, it also means the competition is going to be absolutely merciless. Because if 3 people in Austin can build it,
3 people in Talon or Seoul can build the exact same thing simultaneously.
right, which transitions perfectly into the actual applications. Where are these hyper-agile teams pointing their incredibly powerful technical lasers?
They're aiming at the dinosaurs.
The research outlines 10 very specific startup ideas that VCs are hunting for right now, categorized by sector. We'll start with what the sources identify as the big three high-impact sectors.
These are massive, historically sluggish legacy industries, absolutely ripe for a violent disruption.
Let's dive into the first one, AI healthcare assistance.
Okay.
Now, the futurist in me looks at this and sees a complete paradigm shift in human longevity and quality of life. We are talking about the democratization of highly specialized medical triaging.
It's a huge vision.
Imagine an AI healthcare assistant that sits locally on your device. It has ingested every peer-reviewed piece of medical literature ever published, up to the minute.
Mm-hmm.
It cross-references your real-time biometric data from your wearables, your historical electronic health records, your genetic markers, and your current symptoms.
Has the whole picture.
Exactly. It can identify patterns and catch anomalies that a brilliant but ultimately human doctor at the end of a chaotic 14-hour shift might simply miss.
Because humans get tired. Algorithms don't.
The potential to catch oncology markers or cardiac issues months before they become acute isn't just a lucrative business opportunity, it's a fundamental moral imperative.
It is an incredibly compelling vision. And from a purely technical standpoint, the underlying architecture to parse that multimodal data largely exists today.
We have the tech right now.
We do. We have the context windows to ingest the medical history, and we have the pattern recognition capabilities to flag the anomalies. However,
Here comes the reality check.
here it comes. If we are analyzing this as a business strategy, we have to inject a heavy dose of reality into the conversation. The barrier to building a billion-dollar healthcare startup in this space has almost nothing to do with the elegance of the machine learning model.
It's not about the code.
Not at all. The barrier is compliance.
They're talking about the regulatory labyrinth.
The labyrinth is an understatement. Navigating the massive, entrenched hurdles of healthcare regulation, securing FDA approvals for software as a medical device.
That wouldn't be.
Right. And adhering to draconian data privacy frameworks like HIPAA. It's a brutal, capital-intensive grind. Let's look at the core issue, liability.
Oh, man. Yeah.
If that highly capable AI assistant analyzes a patient's wearable data and suggests an incorrect diagnostic path,
Or worse, fails to flag a critical cardiac event.
exactly, who assumes the legal liability?
That's the million-dollar question, or rather the billion-dollar question.
If a human physician makes a diagnostic error, there is an established framework for medical malpractice. It's built into the system. Everyone has insurance for it.
But if an algorithm makes an error,
The legal framework is completely undefined. Does the patient sue the three-person startup that built the application?
do they sue the massive tech giant that trained the foundational model the app relies on?
Do they sue the cloud provider hosting the data?
Wow.
While the technology is ready to deploy tomorrow, the legal, insurance, and regulatory frameworks are decades behind the reality of the code. That gap is where these startups will actually be made or broken.
I see your point regarding the US market, but let me challenge that assumption for a moment based on the global nature of this tech.
Go for it.
What if these startups simply bypass the highly regulated Western markets initially? What if a team builds this incredible diagnostic tool and deploys it in emerging markets where the ratio of doctors to patients is astronomically low?
And the regulatory environment is more permissive.
Right, because the alternative to AI healthcare is literally no healthcare at all. They could build their data moats and refine their models offshore and only tackle the FDA once they have undeniable massive scale efficacy data.
That is a highly viable go-to-market strategy, and we're actually already seeing variations of it.
Yeah.
Yes. However, even if you solve the regulatory piece in a specific geography, you still face the workflow integration problem.
Getting doctors to actually use it.
Exactly. Healthcare systems run on notoriously clunky, siloed legacy software like Epic or Cerner. Doctors are universally burnt out and actively hostile toward adopting new user interfaces that add clicks to their day.
I don't blame them.
A successful AI healthcare startup can't just be a standalone app. It has to act as a seamless, invisible layer that injects critical insights directly into the physician's existing workflow without requiring them to change their behavior.
So if you build a brilliant diagnostic tool, but require the doctor to log into a separate portal to use it,
The adoption rate will be zero.
the friction of user adoption overpowers the brilliance of the technology. That's a crucial takeaway.
Always.
Let's move to the second major sector in the big three. AI education platforms.
Another massive legacy system.
Similar to healthcare, the traditional legacy model here is fundamentally broken. We have a system designed in the Industrial Revolution. One teacher attempting to deliver a standardized curriculum to 30 different students.
All of whom possess entirely different learning speeds, aptitudes, and neurotypes simultaneously.
It's impossible. Now, the startup thesis here is the deployment of highly personalized AI education models.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
We are talking about an AI tutor that creates a real-time, dynamic, latent space map of a student's entire knowledge graph.
Mm.
If it detects that a student is a highly visual learner struggling with an abstract algebra concept, it instantly generates an interactive 3D model to explain it.
It adapts on the fly.
If it senses frustration through input cadence, it dials back the difficulty and reinforces foundational concepts before moving forward. It paces the entire curriculum perfectly to the individual, ensuring complete, absolute mastery of a subject before introducing the next variable.
It effectively gives every student on Earth a world-class, infinitely patient, personalized tutor.
The societal value of that kind of bespoke pedagogy is unquestionable.
It is. But again, if we connect this to the broader picture of building a scalable business, we run into a massive structural bottleneck.
Let me guess. Institutional adoption.
You got it.
Hmm,
Public education systems are essentially the inverse of the agile startups trying to disrupt them.
very true.
They are notoriously slow-moving, heavily bureaucratic, fragmented across thousands of local districts, and subject to intense political, budgetary, and union pressures.
Trying to execute a B2B enterprise sales strategy targeting a local school board sounds like an absolute nightmare for a fast-moving startup.
It is. You could run out of runway before they even schedule a second meeting.
Wow.
The enterprise sales cycle in public education can literally take years. And the procurement processes are designed to favor massive, established legacy publishers, not three developers with a revolutionary algorithmic tutor.
So what's the play? The strategic question for these startups becomes one of distribution.
Do you attempt the agonizing process of integrating into the existing, slow-moving institutional system? Or do you bypass it entirely?
I think you bypass it.
I agree. I would argue that the startups that successfully capture a billion-dollar valuation in the education sector will be the ones that adopt a purely direct-to-consumer model.
You do see.
They will bypass the school boards, bypass the district superintendents, and market directly to parents who are acutely aware of the system's failings and are desperate to give their children an academic edge.
I completely agree with the direct-to-consumer angle.
Mm-hmm.
But that introduces a completely different structural problem.
Which is?
The monopoly on credentialing.
Ah,
If a student uses an AI platform to flawlessly master multivariable calculus and organic chemistry by the time they are 14,
which is entirely possible with this tech.
absolutely possible.
Mm.
But if the traditional university admission system doesn't recognize the AI platform's certificate of mastery, the perceived value proposition drops significantly.
It's a huge hurdle.
It's not enough for this startup to just make the user brilliant. They have to figure out how to interface with legacy institutions to get that brilliance officially validated.
Yeah.
It's the friction between a new, vastly superior method of learning and an antiquated method of proving that you learned.
It was exactly why the most ambitious education startups aren't just building tutoring tools, they are attempting to build entirely new credentialing ecosystems from scratch.
Partnering with major tech employers directly.
Yes. Going to Google or Microsoft and saying, if a student passes our AI mastery tests, will you accept that in lieu of a traditional degree?
It's a massive heavy lift.
It is, but that is the scale of ambition required for a billion-dollar valuation. You have to replace the institution, not just the textbook.
That perfectly sets up the third idea in our major sector breakdown, which is AI productivity platforms.
Now, this is where things get moving.
I feel like this is the one area where the friction we just discussed, the regulatory hurdles in healthcare, the credentialing monopolies in education, it largely evaporates.
It's a much cleaner playing field.
We're talking about platforms that leverage complex architectures like retrieval augmented generation or RAG. They securely ingest a company's entire unstructured data silo, every email, Slack message, PDF, and code base.
Everything the company has ever written.
Right. And they don't just organize your calendar. They actively draft comprehensive project reports based on fragmented meeting notes. They synthesize context across dozens of chaotic communication channels, and they actively manage cross-department workflows.
It's a superpowered chief of staff for everyone.
They remove the cognitive friction from daily operations, allowing human employees to focus on high-level strategic thinking rather than spending 40% of their week formatting spreadsheets and hunting down internal documents.
From a purely pragmatic venture capital perspective, this sector represents arguably the most straightforward, lowest friction path to that billion-dollar valuation.
Why is that? Just the lack of regulation?
It's because the return on investment is incredibly clear. It's instantaneous and highly measurable.
The ROI is obvious.
Right. If a startup pitches an AI healthcare tool to a hospital network, the hospital administration has to weigh the potential benefits against years of legal liability, compliance audits, workflow disruption.
The sales cycle is agonizing.
But if that same startup pitches an AI productivity platform to the operations chief of a Fortune 500 company,
And they can mathematically prove that their software will save every single one of their 10,000 employees just 4 hours a week of low-level administrative work.
that is a massive, immediate, undeniable financial win.
The math is almost too easy. You calculate the average hourly rate of the employees, multiply it by the hours saved, and the software pays for itself 100 times over in the first quarter.
Precisely. Startups in the enterprise productivity space face drastically lower regulatory hurdles and significantly faster sales cycles. They don't need FDA approval to summarize a marketing meeting.
True.
They are an incredibly attractive target for venture capital because the value proposition to the end customer is beautifully black and white.
I'm not entirely convinced by the VC logic there, though.
Yeah.
Specifically regarding the competitive landscape.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
Because the barriers to entry are so low, because you don't need FDA approval,
Yeah.
isn't this space incredibly saturated? Every developer with access to an API key is trying to build a smarter corporate wiki or an automated note taker.
That's very true.
So how does a small startup actually build a defensible position against Microsoft or Google? They already own the underlying enterprise workspace. They can just integrate those features natively.
That is the exact crucible these startups face. The ones that survive and reach unicorn status won't do it by building generic tools.
They can't just be a better spell check.
They survive by building highly verticalized, deeply integrated platforms that become the central nervous system of very specific workflows.
Give me an example.
They don't build a tool for taking notes. They build a platform specifically designed to automate the entire compliance reporting pipeline for international finance firms.
Yeah, I see.
Ensuring strict data loss prevention protocols while pulling from real-time global regulatory databases. They solve highly complex, specialized pain points that the big tech horizontal platforms are too generalized to effectively address.
That makes perfect sense. They have to burrow so deeply into a specific, high-value niche that ripping them out becomes an operational impossibility.
You make yourself indispensable.
Okay, we've dissected the big three legacy sectors. Let's shift our focus to the underlying foundation of the digital world itself. Section 3 of our roadmap covers the infrastructure of tomorrow, encompassing ideas 4 through 7.
The plumbing of the future.
We have to start with idea number 4, AI cybersecurity companies. And honestly, reading the source material on this sector didn't fill me with excitement. It filled me with a profound sense of anxiety.
It's terrifying stuff.
The escalation of AI-driven cyber threats is moving at a terrifying velocity. We are no longer just talking about static malware signatures.
Right. We are looking at autonomous, AI-driven malware, utilizing things like generative adversarial networks to rapidly mutate and rewrite its own code in real time to evade detection.
We are talking about zero-day exploits being discovered and weaponized by algorithms in minutes rather than months. It feels like human security teams are bringing a magnifying glass to a laser fight.
That's exactly what it is.
The mean time to respond has to drop from hours down to milliseconds.
Your anxiety is entirely justified by the data. The threat landscape has fundamentally and permanently altered.
How did it used to work?
For decades, cybersecurity was essentially a moat and castle paradigm. You built a firewall, and you looked for known bad actors trying to breach it.
Pretty straightforward.
Today, we are dealing with adversarial AI that can launch millions of sophisticated, highly targeted, context-aware phishing attacks simultaneously.
Tailoring the language to mimic a specific employee's writing style based on scraped social data.
Yes. And that terrifying reality is exactly why AI cybersecurity startups are uniquely positioned to command some of the highest valuations in the current market.
Because it shifts from an operational expense to a literal existential necessity.
Exactly. If an AI productivity platform is a vitamin that helps a company operate more efficiently, an AI cybersecurity platform is the critical life support keeping the patient breathing.
The cost of not possessing an AI-driven defense architecture is corporate ruin.
A single well-executed breach, orchestrated by adversarial AI, can cost a multinational corporation billions of dollars in erased market cap, massive class action lawsuits, and irrevocable destruction of consumer trust.
So the budgets are huge.
Enterprise companies possess virtually unlimited budgets for effective defense mechanisms. The startups that can successfully architect what we call a digital immune system.
A digital immune system. I love that phrasing.
It's a fully autonomous network defense that identifies anomalous gunzero patterns and neutralizes AI-driven threats in milliseconds, without requiring a human analyst to review the logs first.
Because if a human has to review it, you're already dead.
Exactly. Startups building that are essentially printing their own valuations. The alternative for the client is quite literally extinction.
A digital immune system. It captures the biological speed and autonomous nature of how this warfare is actually playing out on the servers.
It's biological warfare in code.
Keeping with the theme of corporate infrastructure, let's group ideas 5 and 6 together. AI marketing automation and AI customer service solutions.
Two massive cost centers for any corporation.
When I look at the capabilities here, I'm struck by the concept of infinite scale combined with hyper-personalization. We're moving beyond basic audience segmentation into the era of the segment of one.
The holy grail for marketers.
Imagine a global retail brand utilizing an AI platform that dynamically generates highly personalized, fully rendered video advertisements for every single one of its millions of customers.
It tailors the environment, the language, the product placement.
To their exact real-time browsing preferences and demographic data,
Mm.
rendering the video on the edge in milliseconds.
Or consider a customer service application. An irate customer calls in, and an AI agent handles a deeply complex dispute.
Speaking in a perfectly empathetic tone, it never gets frustrated.
It accesses the entire global shipping database instantly and resolves the issue in 30 seconds.
It is the ultimate brand interaction.
It is. And once again, we have to follow the money to understand the venture capital appeal.
Why are VCs aggressively funding these two specific niches?
Because these startups aren't just creating new revenue streams, they are directly cannibalizing massive, entrenched corporate expenditures.
They are targeting the budgets currently allocated to legacy human labor and massive agency retainers.
Precisely. Analyze the profit and loss statement of a major airline, a telecommunications conglomerate, or an international bank. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars annually maintaining sprawling global call centers.
Dealing with high turnover rates, training costs, inconsistent quality of service.
They spend tens of millions on massive advertising agencies to run focus groups, manually build campaigns, and execute slow, methodical A/B testing.
And an AI startup can walk into a boardroom and definitively prove
We will automate 80% of your Tier 1 and Tier 2 customer service inquiries, drastically reduce your average handle time, and simultaneously deliver higher customer satisfaction scores than your human agents.
or our platform will autonomously generate, deploy, and analyze 10,000 ad variations a day across all platforms for a fraction of your current agency retainer.
Those startups are moving down a very fast, very greased track to $1 billion valuation. They are directly capturing the massive budgets that used to keep legacy infrastructure afloat.
It's a massive, violent wealth transfer from old world analog infrastructure to new world algorithmic efficiency.
Absolutely.
And speaking of infrastructure, idea number 7 is the foundational layer that makes all of this possible. AI data analysis platforms.
The bedrock.
I was trying to conceptualize how massive corporations actually deal with their data today, and it's like trying to map an ocean while looking through a straw.
That's a very accurate visual.
Companies possess petabytes of raw data,
Mhm.
intricate customer habits, micro fluctuations in supply chain logistics, global market trends. But traditional structured SQL databases and human analysts simply cannot process or correlate it fast enough to make meaningful real-time decisions.
We are drowning in an unstructured information, but completely starving for actionable insight.
That is the exact friction point these startups are targeting.
In the context of the current AI boom, I always frame AI data analysis platforms as the picks and shovels of the gold rush.
Right. During a gold rush, the entities that consistently generate the most wealth are usually the individual prospectors panning for gold in the river.
It's the merchants providing the crucial infrastructure, selling the shovels, the tents, and the pickaxes.
Because regardless of who strikes gold, everyone has to buy a shovel.
Exactly. Every single enterprise on Earth now acutely realizes they need to leverage their proprietary data to survive. But raw, chaotic, unstructured data scattered across a dozen different cloud environments is functionally useless.
So, what do these platforms do?
The startups commanding massive valuations in this space are the ones building advanced vector databases and semantic search architectures. They plug into a company's messy data silos, utilize large language models to map and structure that data instantly, and turn it into predictive business logic.
Give me a real world scenario.
A platform that can ingest 10 years of unstructured PDF invoices,
Hmm.
cross reference it with real time global weather patterns and social media sentiment, and then tell a massive retailer exactly how much winter inventory to allocate to a specific region.
That platform becomes indispensable.
It evolves from being a mere software tool into the central nervous system of the enterprise. And venture capitalists love foundational infrastructure.
Because once a multinational integrates your data platform at that core level, the switching costs are so astronomically high that the churn rate drops to near zero.
They become deeply embedded in the host organism. It's brilliant.
Okay, so we've covered the legacy sectors and we've mapped out the digital infrastructure. Now we are crossing over into section 4 of the source material, the next frontier.
This is where it gets a little philosophical.
It does. This is where AI begins encroaching on domains we traditionally assumed were exclusively fundamentally human, specifically creativity and intuition. We are looking at ideas 8, 9, and 10.
Let's start with idea number 8, AI creative tools.
As someone who has spent a lot of time in content creation, I am simultaneously fascinated and terrified by this.
Most creatives are.
We are watching startups build tools that aggressively lower the barrier to entry for video production, complex graphic design, music composition, and high-level copywriting.
A founder with a brilliant conceptual idea but absolutely zero technical skill in video editing or 3D rendering can now utilize text to video models to generate a stunning cinematic commercial.
It is radically democratizing the entire creative process.
It undeniably democratizes the generation of assets. However, from a rigorous business strategy standpoint, this sector raises an incredibly important question regarding defensibility.
Once again,
Always the moats. Is there a lasting economic moat for startups building these creative tools? The concept of an economic moat is crucial here. It's the structural advantage that protects your business from being destroyed by larger competitors.
so if a small, agile startup builds a brilliant, intuitive interface that utilizes an API to generate highly specific custom sound effects,
They might acquire 1 million users very rapidly due to the novelty and utility. But what happens to that business model when the massive tech behemoths, the companies actually building and training the foundational models, like OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google, simply add native sound effect generation as a free built-in feature in their next major update?
the startup is instantly rendered obsolete. Their entire business model gets evaporated overnight.
Precisely. The harsh reality is that many of these creative startups are essentially building features, not standalone, defensible companies. They are creating thin wrappers around someone else's foundational model.
So how do they survive?
For an AI creative tool to reach and maintain a $1 billion valuation, it must offer something the foundational models cannot easily replicate: deep, specialized workflow integration.
It has to embed itself seamlessly into professional, enterprise-grade production pipelines.
It needs to handle complex digital rights management, multi-user collaborative editing, version control, and brand-specific asset libraries. If the product is merely a novelty generation tool, the underlying foundational models will inevitably absorb that capability and eat the startup alive.
Building a feature, not a company. That is a brutal but necessary reality check for thousands of developers currently building in this space. It's not about the generation, it's about the workflow.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pivot to idea number 9. And I know this specific application aligns closely with your background. AI business intelligence platforms.
This is, without hyperbole, perhaps the most powerful enterprise application on the board right now.
We touched on data analysis earlier,
Mhm.
structuring the past.
But advanced AI business intelligence, or BI, takes that structured data and propels it forward into predictive intuition. We are talking about providing CEOs, executive boards, and logistics commanders with what is functionally an AI oracle.
An AI org.
Traditional BI tools are fundamentally reactive. They generate beautiful dashboards that tell executive leadership what happened last quarter, allowing them to adjust strategy after the fact.
Driving while looking in the rearview mirror.
The new wave of AI business intelligence tools act autonomously. They constantly analyze a staggering array of variables: micro fluctuations in global supply chains, geopolitical news feeds, real time shifts in consumer spending habits across different geographies, and competitor price changes down to the cent.
Imagine a platform that proactively alerts a CEO based on a subtle, emerging shift in raw material costs in Southeast Asia, correlated with changing social media sentiment regarding sustainability in the European market. Your flagship product will face a severe margin squeeze in exactly 4 months. We recommend adjusting supplier contracts in Vietnam immediately and shifting the marketing spend to highlight product durability.
It's synthesizing millions of data points into a single, highly actionable, strategic directive.
Giving enterprise leadership that kind of predictive superpower. The ability to proactively steer the ship around the iceberg rather than just analyzing the damage after the collision, that is a definitive fast track to market domination.
Massive corporations will eagerly pay astronomical, multi-million dollar annual licensing fees for that level of foresight.
That leads us directly into the final concept, idea number 10. AI personal assistants. And to be clear, we are not talking about the legacy voice assistants currently residing on our phones
The ones that struggle to accurately set a kitchen timer.
or misunderstand basic contextual requests.
Right.
The sources are envisioning a truly proactive, hyper-capable digital twin.
An AI that operates continuously in the background, managing the immense cognitive load of modern life.
It reads and prioritizes your emails, drafts complex responses perfectly matching your exact tone and cadence, autonomously negotiates a better rate with your internet service provider by utilizing real-time competitor pricing.
It books your flights based on your historical airline preferences and seating habits. It dynamically manages your entire schedule. It is the ultimate mass market consumer application.
And honestly, if we are debating which of these last two ideas, that the business intelligence platforms or the personal assistants will ultimately dominate the future and command the highest valuations, I firmly believe it's the personal assistant. Yes, the mass consumer appeal is just too vast to ignore. If a startup can successfully give 3 billion people their own highly competent chief of staff, the valuation isn't just $1 billion. We are looking at the first $10 trillion company. The total addressable market is essentially every human with a smartphone.
I understand the allure of that argument, and the sheer mathematical scale of the global consumer market is undeniably seductive. It is the ultimate grand slam. But
Here it comes.
if I am strategically deploying venture capital and betting on which sector will reliably produce the next wave of billion-dollar companies in the near term, I am definitively betting on business intelligence. Let me challenge your consumer thesis.
Bring it on. Why pass up a market of 3 billion users?
Because the consumer market is notoriously fickle, highly price sensitive, and the technical challenge of training an AI to perfectly mimic, anticipate, and manage an individual human's chaotic, unpredictable personal life is exponentially more complex than optimizing a corporate supply chain.
You think human lives are harder to predict than global shipping?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Consumers have zero tolerance for friction. If an AI assistant hallucinates and books a flight for the wrong day or sends an inappropriately toned email to their boss, that consumer will immediately abandon the platform and actively campaign against it. The churn rate is brutal.
Okay, fair point on the churn.
Enterprises, conversely, possess the massive concentrated budgets required to actually fund the immense compute costs of these advanced models. Furthermore, enterprise problems, while vastly larger in scale, are highly structured. Optimizing a global logistics network is ultimately a complex math problem. Navigating the nuances of human relationships and personal preferences is not.
Right.
The willingness of a Fortune 500 company to drop $10 million annually on a BI platform that provides a verifiable 3% increase in operational efficiency vastly outpaces the willingness of the average consumer to pay $20 a month for a digital assistant. The enterprise annual contract value is the ultimate trump card in building sustainable revenue.
I see your point regarding the immediate path to revenue. The enterprise sector provides the stable capital required to survive the massive compute costs of the current era, whereas the consumer play is a massive, high-risk burn rate until you achieve absolute monopoly scale.
Exactly.
So, what does this all mean for the builders? We've explored these 10 incredible startup trajectories, but it's time for Section 5, the reality check.
We need to dissect the risks and challenges because reading between the lines of these sources, building in the space is not all sunshine and unicorn valuations.
It is a highly volatile, highly dangerous environment.
Very much so.
We briefly touched on the concept of defensibility and moats, but how brutal is the reality of startup competition right now, specifically regarding speed to market?
It is arguably more brutal and unforgiving than any previous technological cycle in history.
Because the foundational models dramatically lower the barrier to entry for writing code and generating applications.
Exactly. Which means that a capable team anywhere in the world can analyze your newly launched product, reverse engineer the core utility, and spin up a direct competitor in a matter of weeks, if not days.
The technology itself is rapidly becoming commoditized.
Therefore, the true battleground is no longer purely about having a superior algorithm. It is entirely about go to market velocity and user acquisition. You have to capture the user base, integrate into their workflows, and lock them into your ecosystem so rapidly that by the time a competitor, whether a tech giant or another startup, replicates your core feature set, your users are mathematically unwilling to leave.
You have to build up such a rich history of their proprietary data within your platform that the friction of migrating to a slightly better tool isn't worth the operational headache.
It is a frantic land grab. You have to stake your claim, build the operational fence, and embed yourself deeply before the empire even notices you exist.
A frantic land grab where everyone has access to the exact same heavy machinery. But even if a startup executes that land grab perfectly, there is a massive, unpredictable shadow looming over everything we've discussed today: regulation and data privacy. And we need to look at this impartially, through a purely operational lens, because the global landscape is incredibly complex.
You have governments worldwide scrambling to construct regulatory frameworks for a technology they barely comprehend.
On one hand, there are highly legitimate pressing concerns regarding algorithmic bias, autonomous safety, deepfakes, and massive economic disruption. On the other hand, heavy-handed reactionary regulation can absolutely stifle innovation and effectively hand a permanent monopoly to the incumbent tech giants.
The only entities possessing the war chest necessary to employ the army of compliance lawyers required to navigate the red tape.
Precisely. And regardless of whether an individual founder views government intervention as a necessary societal safeguard or an overreaching innovation-killing hindrance, it is an undeniable, concrete business reality that these startups must strategically navigate.
And this raises an incredibly important question regarding data privacy specifically, which is the lifeblood of this entire boom.
The foundation of all generative AI and predictive analytics is training data.
Let's imagine a scenario. A small, brilliant startup builds a highly successful platform, perhaps a personalized education tutor or an enterprise productivity tool. To make their AI increasingly competent, they train their proprietary models on millions of user interactions, internalizing the nuances of how their users operate.
What happens if, a year after they achieve a massive valuation, a new sweeping legislative privacy framework is enacted?
Something akin to the GDPR in Europe, but specifically targeted at AI training data methodologies.
You're talking about the nightmare scenario of retroactive data loss.
Yes. What if a new law dictates that consumers must provide explicit, granular opt in consent for their data to have been used in model training, and it applies retroactively to all existing models?
That startup, currently valued at $1 billion, might be legally forced to delete their entire underlying algorithmic model and start completely from scratch.
Their core asset is suddenly declared illegal. $1 billion valuation, built on years of data aggregation, can evaporate overnight under the stroke of a single legislative pen.
The regulatory risk in this sector is highly asymmetric. It's unpredictable, it varies wildly by geographic jurisdiction, and it can be instantly fatal to a startup that hasn't architected its data pipelines with extreme forward-looking caution.
That is genuinely terrifying from an investment perspective. It's the equivalent of spending billions to build a massive skyscraper, and the day before you open, the city retroactively changes the zoning laws to declare the specific type of steel you used illegal, forcing you to demolish the entire structure.
And compounding those legal and regulatory risks, we have to acknowledge the fundamental technology limitations.
Because despite the massive, breathless hype cycles, the AI infrastructure we have deployed today is not flawless.
We're dealing with models that still actively hallucinate. confidently fabricating completely false information or citing non-existent precedents. They still struggle with maintaining coherence over massive context windows.
And perhaps most critically, as global user demand skyrockets, we are hitting severe processing bottlenecks.
There is literally a global geopolitical shortage of the specialized semiconductor chips required to run the inference for these models at scale.
That physical compute limitation is the core governor on the speed of this revolution. For a startup to justify and maintain a billion-dollar valuation in the enterprise sector, it must provide absolute enterprise-grade reliability.
If a human employee in a logistics firm makes an error 5% of the time, that is an operational issue, but it's generally manageable through standard QA processes.
However, if a fully automated AI platform processing 10,000 critical supply chain actions a second makes an error 5% of the time, that is not an operational issue.
That is a catastrophic systemic failure that can bankrupt a client.
The underlying technology is improving at a breathtaking rate, but mathematically guaranteeing the absolute flawless reliability required to autonomously run mission-critical sectors like healthcare diagnostics, autonomous cybersecurity, or high-frequency finance is a massive technical hurdle that the industry has not fully cleared yet.
So, bringing all of these complex threads together. Section 6, the future generation of AI startups. We've analyzed the underlying boom, we've dissected the 10 high-impact sectors, and we've stared deeply into the existential risks of regulation, competition, and compute limitations.
Based on this comprehensive roadmap, what do the sources predict the next generation of successful AI startups will actually look like?
If I am synthesizing the analysis correctly, the era of the quick, opportunistic AI wrapper, where a developer simply builds a sleek user interface on top of an existing API like ChatGPT and attempts to market it as a standalone company, that era is definitively over.
It is completely over. As we discussed regarding the creative tools, the barrier to entry for building a wrapper is essentially zero, which means the long-term defensible value of that business is also zero.
So where does the capital go next?
The future of this sector, the ventures that will actually secure the next wave of massive venture capital funding, will belong to deep, complex integration. The most successful AI startups of tomorrow won't look like traditional, pristine tech companies operating purely in the digital ether.
They will be composed of small, incredibly agile, highly specialized teams that take these powerful foundational models and embed them deeply into highly regulated, deeply complex, and frankly, unglamorous physical industries.
Unglamorous physical industries, you mean stepping away from software as a service and getting into the messy reality of the physical world?
Like what specifically?
Think about massive legacy sectors like global maritime shipping, heavy industrial manufacturing, commercial agriculture, complex resource extraction, and physical supply chain management.
These are multi-trillion-dollar global industries that, behind the scenes, are still largely operating on fragile Excel spreadsheets, antiquated, fragmented software systems from the 1990s, and literal clipboard management.
An AI startup that doesn't just offer a generic chat interface, but actually builds the bespoke hardware and software to integrate edge computing sensors, real time predictive analytics, and autonomous decision making directly into the physical movement of cargo ships, or the micro optimization of water and fertilizer usage across millions of acres of crop yields.
That is where the truly defensible, multi-billion-dollar empires of tomorrow will be built.
They will utilize AI to solve incredibly hard, messy, real world logistical problems that the big horizontal tech companies fundamentally do not want to touch because it requires getting their hands dirty in the complexities of legacy physical infrastructure.
I absolutely love that vision. It shifts the entire narrative. It's no longer just about making our screens smarter or our emails faster. It's about making the physical world vastly more efficient and resilient.
We're talking about utilizing these digital brains to systematically upgrade the very physical scaffolding of human civilization.
It's a breathtaking scope of ambition. Well, we have covered an immense, complex amount of ground today. From analyzing the explosive boom fueled by shifting venture capital and the asymmetrical power of small, hyper-agile teams, to breaking down the 10 specific sectors poised for massive disruption.
We look at the big three legacy moonshots in healthcare, education, and productivity.
We explored the critical foundational infrastructure of cybersecurity, marketing automation, and data analysis. We pushed into the frontier of creative tools, debated the massive divide between business intelligence and personal assistance.
And crucially, we grounded all of that potential in the brutal operational reality of cutthroat competition, impending regulation, and the physical limits of compute power.
Now, as always, we want to turn this entire conversation back to you, the listener. You have heard the detailed evidence, you've listened to the strategic debates, you know exactly where the smart global capital is moving, and you know where the hidden regulatory landmines are buried.
So, based on everything we've unpacked today, I want to ask you the core question posed by our source material.
Which specific AI startup architecture do you think possesses the right combination of massive demand and defensibility to genuinely become the next billion-dollar company?
Hmm.
Are you placing your bets on the highly lucrative, sticky enterprise safety of business intelligence, or are you drawn to the high-risk, world-changing potential of an AI healthcare assistant?
It is arguably the defining economic question of this entire technological cycle. And as you consider your thesis on that, I want to leave you with one final, broader implication to mull over. Something that hasn't been explicitly detailed in our roadmap today, but that quietly hangs over this entire paradigm shift.
Go ahead.
We noted extensively earlier that a small, highly adaptable team of 3 or 4 people can now leverage autonomous AI agents to execute the operational workload of a 1,000-person legacy corporation, potentially achieving a $1 billion valuation with almost zero human overhead. If that operational reality holds true, what does that ultimately mean for the future existence of the traditional multinational company? Will the Fortune 500 of tomorrow even possess massive corporate campuses, sprawling HR departments, and hundreds of thousands of employees?
Or will the global economy eventually be dominated by 500 small, decentralized groups of friends, sitting in coffee shops around the world with incredibly smart laptops, quietly wielding the economic power and output of literal nation states?
Wow.
That is a heavy, incredible thought to end on. It applies a complete fundamental redefinition of what a corporation even is in the 21st century. I love it.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the future economy. Keep questioning the consensus, keep exploring the edges of what's possible, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.